Okay, good afternoon. I'm Lori Karras in the graduate school, and everybody who is remaining in this room should be eligible for Washington State residency, but not already a state resident. So if there's anybody here who's already established residency, who is a Washington State resident, you don't need to hear what I have to say, okay? This is an extremely important presentation in terms of information because you need to start acting right away. So that's why I'm glad that there's a good group that has remained, and based on my previous experience, the information I'm going to give you, many of you have already done it. So I'll check with you and see where you are in terms of this process. Okay, so establishing Washington State residency. If you are on an assistantship, you received a letter with your offer, and it should have information in there about Washington residency. So if you did not receive that letter, I'd appreciate at some point if you let me know, because what we're trying to do is make sure all the departments are sending this information out in a timely manner. So what do you need to do to establish Washington residency? Well, first of all, you have to prove that you have lived in the state of Washington for 12 consecutive months, and so we'll talk about how you go about doing that. You also need to prove that you have significant ties to the state and that you are financially independent, and I'm going to come back to each of these points. Okay, so once you've taken all these necessary steps, then you're going to need to submit your application in person or by email with all of the supporting documents. Okay, so let's go through these. How do I prove that I am a legal resident of Washington for tuition purposes? And of course, for tuition purposes is why this is so important. Anybody know what out-of-state tuition is? $12,000. Okay, so how much more is out-of-state tuition than in-state tuition? Very good. So it's about twice the rate. Now, what you don't want to do is fail to establish Washington residency and see then that non-resident tuition show up on your student account. That's really scary. All right, so to prove that you are a legal resident, you need proof of domicile. That means you have to prove that you are living in the state. You need to have a Washington driver's license, a Washington voter registration card, vehicle registration, and again, financial independence. So, and not all of these may apply to you, so we can talk about that, and we should have plenty of time for questions. So, proof of domicile. So, starting now, you are going to need to be able to provide lease or rental agreement. Now, if you are in an arrangement where you don't have a formal lease, you're going to need to provide some sort of proof that you are living here. So keep that in mind. If you have purchased a home in the state, there obviously would be a home purchase agreement. So rent receipts if you are renting. So if you don't have a lease, you should ask for some type of a receipt to prove that you're living here. Your canceled checks would be one proof. A letter from your landlord. So if you're renting a room in some kind of informal arrangement from someone, so a letter from your landlord, a letter from your employer, or proof of bank account, etc. So typically it's some kind of rent agreement or canceled checks that you're going to be providing. Getting your Washington driver's license. How many of you already have your Washington driver's license? Outstanding. Good job. Now's the time to do it. For those of you who don't have your Washington driver's license, I would recommend you try and get it as quickly as possible before the Driver's License Bureau gets really crazy, okay? So you can pre-apply online, and anybody who has their Washington driver's license, did you pre-apply online? Okay, did that seem to be a good process? Yes? You'd recommend pre-applying online? Very good, thank you. Okay, so you will, if you can pre-apply online if you're getting your Washington driver's license, your first Washington driver's license, and if you have a Washington residence street address, which you of course are all going to have a Washington street address because you're going to be living in the state of Washington. So the Driver's License Bureau is down on Grand Avenue. It's, let's see, I think it's right next to a appliance store. We used to say it's right next to the state liquor store, but the state liquor store is no longer there. So 980 South Grand. So you'll need to bring proof of identity. There's a $35 application fee and a $54 issuance fee, and those are now good for 6 years. So you do it once. It should take you through most of your or all of your program here, and you can see the form of payment that they accept. You will need to provide your Social Security number, and you'll need to have a vision screening test. It's pretty straightforward, and pass any other required tests if necessary. Okay, so get your driver's license. You are actually required to have your driver's license, a Washington driver's license, if you drive within 30 days of moving to the state. So this is not only to establish Washington residency, it is the state law. So you need to get your driver's license within 30 days of moving to the state. And so here's what you're going to need for your proof of identity. So you're going to need to either have your out-of-state driver's license, and a military ID with photo, U.S. passport, immigration ID with signature, or some other U.S. certificate of citizenship. So you can go on to the Washington Department of Licensing site for more information. But just make sure when you go there that you're prepared, because it's you take a number and you wait. And what you don't want to do is take a number and wait for half an hour, and get up there and be told that you don't have the proper identification. Okay, so you can register to vote when you get your driver's license. That's the easiest way to do it. And if not, you can register online, by mail, in person. They make it really easy for you to vote to register to vote in the state. You won't necessarily get a voter registration card, so you may need to contact the county auditor's office if you need to have proof of the date of your voter registration. And here's where you can do it. So the Whitman County Auditor, so that's over in Colfax. Okay, so if you need to get a proof of voter registration. Okay, registering your vehicles. How many of you have already registered your vehicle in the state? Very good. Okay, so if you have a vehicle, again, just like getting your Washington driver's license, you are required to have that registered in the state within 30 days. And it doesn't matter if someone else owns that vehicle. So if your parents own the vehicle and you're driving it in Washington, it does need to be registered in the state. And this is where I've had people, some students run into some problems because they have difficulty getting the documents they need to get it registered in the state. So, you know, something to be thinking about. If you haven't registered your car already, make sure that you have the necessary documentation. Okay, and again, 30 days. You have 30 days upon arrival in Washington. And the copy of the car's title is what can really hold some people up, because they have difficulty getting the car title. So even if it's not your car, if you're driving it, it does need to be registered. And the car registration is not at the same place that you get the driver's license. It's at the Puffer Belly Depot. It's also on Grand Avenue, but it's closer to downtown. Okay, so almost when you first come into Pullman from Colfax, it's almost right there. All right, so the financial independence piece is another one that we're seeing a lot of students that are having problems with this, and this is why. So for those of you who are coming straight from a baccalaureate program into graduate school, there is a good chance that some of you have been financially dependent on your parents for the first 6 months of this year, of 2015. And the way that would be recognized is that your parents will be planning to claim you as a dependent on their income tax return that they file sometime after the first of the year. Okay, so you need to check with your parents on that. you need to find out, ask your parents, are they planning to claim you as a dependent? And if they are, you're going to need to have a talk with them, because if they claim you as a dependent for 2015, and they're legally entitled to do so, if you were a dependent for more than or for 6 months of the year, they are legally entitled to claim you, but then you will not qualify for Washington residency in your first year here. So the first 6 months that you're here, or the first from now to the end of the year, when they're still claiming you as a dependent, that's going to cause problems when you try to file for your Washington residency. So, talk with your parents now. The documentation that's going to be required is your parents' income tax return, unless on your own income tax return you're not claimed by anyone else as a dependent. Okay, so you're going to have to provide documentation on that. So, and again, here, you'll need to submit a copy of the federal income tax return for the most recent year, and you will document your income. So your income is from now on will be your assistantship. So you'll be filing a W-2 form and your tax return. Income, so again, your income that you would be claiming may include your employment here at the university, financial aid, scholarships, trust funds, etc. So if you are 24 years or younger, you will need to submit an income and expense report. So this is all on, this information is all available online. But again, the most important piece here for some of you is going to be whether or not your parents are planning to claim you as a dependent for 2015. All right? All right, so what if you are not a U.S. citizen? Are you eligible for Washington State residency? Well, possibly. If you're a permanent resident, you may qualify for Washington resident status if your permanent resident status was obtained at least 12 months prior to when you start here. Okay, so permanent residents may qualify, as do some types of visas that are listed here. So it's not just U.S. citizens. There are permanent residents, and some visa holders are eligible. And those individuals, the same requirements for Washington State residency, except voter registration, which obviously wouldn't be, they would not be eligible. Okay? Okay, when should you submit your application and supporting documents? Well, as soon as possible, but it's no later than the 30th calendar day of the semester for which you are applying for Washington State residency. So how it's going to work, you're starting this fall. And so next year, you will be submitting your permanent resident documents, or your Washington State residence documents right around this time. You can actually do it in the summer, get it out of the way if you're around, but no later than the 30th day of next year, the fall semester. Okay, so no later than the 30th day of fall of 2016 that you will be submitting all of your documentation. Yes?
Does it have to be submitted all together, or as we get like our driver's license, or I just kind of do an address change really quick, I already set the landlord saying you can't put it in my citizenship?
The question.
Start a file for you with this?
No, good question. So the question is, do all the documents need to be submitted together? And yes, they should be. If you start submitting documents, no, we won't be keeping a file for you. So, well, with an exception. So the exception on whether you need to resubmit, if you've already submitted a residency application and were denied, then when you resubmit the documentation, the necessary documentation, you don't need to resubmit everything, just the missing documentation. You need to submit an application again, but on the application you would indicate that some of the documents had been previously submitted. So in that case, yes, we would have a file on you. Okay? And so The one thing that you might see if you wait until the 30th day of the semester to file your Washington State residency application, you may see that you start getting, you might start accumulating some fees, late fees, and you might see that the non-resident portion of the tuition shows up on your student account, all right? Don't be alarmed. As long as you're filing by the 30th day and your application is approved, then the non-resident tuition will be removed, as will any late fees. But to avoid that stress of seeing thousands of dollars showing up on your student account, you know, that's why you can file as early as you have the, as you're able. Certainly before the start of the semester, you can get that in. Yes? So the question is, if you're almost at that 12 months but not quite, I would say get it in. Yep. So for example, if you've moved here just within the last week and you want to file, you want to get your documents in sometime in July of 2016, do it. Okay? Yeah. Let's see. Question back here? Good question. Good question. You should contact me, okay? And in fact, I have some cards with me, so for specific questions like that, contact me. The question is in terms of military. Another question up here? Okay, all right, yeah. Okay, so are there other questions? This is the why. Why is this necessary? So one of the things that we get frequently is, why does Washington State University require this? Well, it's actually Washington State, not Washington State University. And so the residency policies are set by the state of Washington. And so what we do is that non-resident graduate students that are on assistantship appointments are given non-resident waivers during their first year. So you will be receiving, if you are on an assistantship, the non-resident tuition will be waived for you, okay? And that's why it's really important to establish residency during your first year, because those non-resident tuition waivers are only granted for 1 year. If residency is not established, the students may be responsible. I mean, that's where it gets really scary. So if residency is not established, students are responsible for that non-resident part of the tuition. And remember, that's the non-resident part is as much as the tuition, okay, as the in-state tuition. And failure to pay non-resident tuition can result in substantial late fees, and they just keep accumulating. And you've already heard what happens when you have these amounts on your student account, right? So what happens when you try to register for classes? Remember from the last presentation? There's a hold on your account. So don't ignore them. And I don't know if you've already been told this, but keep an eye on your student account. Because what surprises me is when I have students come in to see me because they've failed to establish residency and they've got thousands and thousands of dollars on their student accounts and late fees, and they've not looked at their student account. All right, so two things to keep in mind. Check your WSU email regularly and respond when necessary, and keep an eye on your student account, all right? Okay, so there's general information on the residency on the registrar's site, including a questionnaire and frequently asked questions. I would strongly encourage you, if you have specific questions, if you anticipate that there may be a problem, let's say you talk with your parents and they say, yes, we're going to claim you as a dependent, and no, we won't consider not doing that, that rather than wait come and talk to me, okay? So contact me and we can set up an appointment, we can talk about this so we can avoid a lot of stress in advance. Most of the students, the good news is that most of you are going to do just fine. I hope all of you do just fine and not have any problems with residency. But every year there are a certain number of students that have problems with residency, and it's just one additional stress that you don't need. So that's why we're hoping to reach as many students as possible through orientation, because now is the time you need to start acting. Don't wait. You cannot wait until right before you file your residency application to get your driver's license. We see that as a problem. You need to do it within 30 days of moving to the state. You need to get your car registered. So even if you've lived here for a full year and you fail to get your driver's license, that will result in denial of your residency application. Okay? Questions? Yes, in the back. Good question. No. Once you have established Washington residency, you don't need to submit anything again. Okay? Yes. What happens if the title for your car takes more than 30 days? Yeah, they are kind of slow, aren't they? Yes. I would say that there's not much you can do about that. If you have filed it, and if there's some kind of documentation you can get that indicates you filed, keep that. Okay. You know, if it's something that indicates that you have requested this and it's just taking longer, that in itself probably will not result in failure to or denial of your application. If you filed and it's just taking longer, that's a good question. Yes. If you go to the registrar's that first link, see where it said apps? Yeah. Yes. No. So the question is on the application. It asks if you've left this, if you're leaving the state, or if you've left the state. No. If you leave for 2 weeks, that's not going to. I mean, you are expected to reside here continuously. So you know, as long as if you have the documentation from that you've been living here, rent receipts, canceled checks, etc. There's no way that you know anybody's going to know that you've left the state for 2 weeks. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so you're talking about you've moved here now. You will be living here during the academic year, and then you're planning to leave the state in the summer. You're another one that should contact me. Yeah, let's get the answer to that in advance, okay? Yeah, if you can't find it online, please contact me. Yes, and back. Yeah, so you started paying rent in June. When did you get your driver's license? Yeah, so that's going to be that. Probably the driver's license is going to be. If you tried to apply probably in June, it would probably. I would wait until probably July or something to submit. I don't think that starting to pay rent in June in itself, unless you had come here and got a driver's license and registered your car. But the good news is that you shouldn't have a problem then, right, with when you do apply, as long as you're not planning to leave and go to Alaska in the summer. More questions? Okay. I hope to have a chance to talk to all of you for various events throughout your program here. I hope I don't have to talk to any of you about residency, but if you do have any questions, or if you do anticipate there's going to be a problem, be proactive, okay? Don't wait. Don't wait until you've got, you know, $10,000 on your student account and you're stressed out and you don't know what to do. Come and talk to us. All right. Thank you. For those of you who I said come and see me, I'll give you, come up and I'll give you a card, and then anybody else who would like a card, please stop by.